Hi and welcome back to Bike Speed. So this week I'm going to service this lovely Felt FR3 road bike. There's quite a few things went on with this one. I've replaced the rear derailleur cable, the rear brake cable, the bottom bracket bearing, the handlebar tape, and I've gone right through this bike, and you'll agree when you see the end of this bike just what a huge difference we made to this bike with a service and how we can improve your bike to make it really work as it should. You can see here we've got a dragging front brake. It was actually because the quick release lever on the caliper itself was open, and I closed that as it should be, and it was obviously then set too deep for the rim. You can see we've got a chain that is stretched out there, an 11-speed group set, so it needs a new chain, so we're going to replace that along the way with this bike and generally make sure this bike is absolutely spot on. So I'm taking off the cassette. I like to always clean the cassette. I put that through my ultrasonic cleaner as part of the service to make sure we get all the debris off that. You can see the build-up of oil on there. I'm going to clean that up and make sure that's spotless as well when it goes back on the bike, just to complement the new chain that we're going to put on this bike. Now, I initially hadn't really forecast this, but I realised that we've got a problem with the rear derailleur cable. So you can see here the rear derailleur itself is a little bit grimy. We'll clean that up. Everything seemed okay, but I noticed that this here, the very final tail of the cable, was absolutely rock hard. It had perished in some way or deteriorated in some way. There was no movement in it at all. Would make shifting very tricky. But I also found a problem up at the hoods, which will show you that was proof that that cable was life extinct and needed replacing. Also remove the front derailleur. Good to get that through the ultrasonic cleaner. You can see here how grimy that is, so we'll lubricate that and get that absolutely spot on. And as you can hear here, the bottom bracket bearing was life extinct. The customer had noticed this, but as you can hear there, the wear is evident. There was a little bit of play. One bearing was worse than the other, but we need to address that, so we'll get this chain set off of here, get that bottom bracket out and replaced, and then that will be nice moving forward. So I'm just going to extract them out. With this one, I actually extracted the bearing out of the cup and then the cup itself. I'm replacing these cups because these original cups were plastic and they have a little bit of movement in themselves. I'm actually going to replace these with an aluminium bottom bracket by Rotor, so we'll address that and get a new bearing into the bottom bracket there. But I'm also going to take this rear brake off. When they sit underneath like that, they can get very grimy, built up with debris, and we're going to address and sort that out as well. Off comes the front brake. You can see there quite a bit of debris on that brake, a little bit dirty. Could definitely do with a clean up and a re-lubrication, so we're going to do that in with these derailleurs and clean all these up in the ultrasonic cleaner. I took out the jockey wheels there because I'm not going to put those through the ultrasonic cleaner. I don't want to get deep into the bearings of the jockey wheels, those bearings in the center of them. So I'm just going to clean the outers with a bit of brake cleaner to make sure that they're nice and clean, all the debris off them, and they're ready to go back on the bike. And then this derailleur, which I have put through the ultrasonic cleaner because that works deep into the springs, and give that a wash down with warm soapy water. Same with this front derailleur before I start to re-lubricate them. Same with the brakes. Everything's gone through, all cleaned up, absolutely immaculate now and ready for re-lubricating. This cassette, as I mentioned, was built up with debris. Give that a wash down, get those all nice and clean, just so that when this bike goes back together, it will feel and present like a new bike. Wash down the chain set, because obviously that's going into our new bottom bracket when we push that one in. And then I'm using a little bit of Loctite on the derailleur pulley wheels themselves, just to make sure that those pivots in the center will not come undone. Those axles, make sure that they're absolutely in there permanently. And then I'm also going to lubricate the thumb adjuster, so I'm using our copper grease on the threads themselves and a little bit of general purpose grease on the thumb adjuster itself to make sure that actuates correctly. And then we're going to lubricate the pivot points on the derailleur itself. I like to do this so that everything actuates correctly, and a little bit of our premium grease on the spring to stop that rusting and make sure that the water can't sit on that and rust it away. Same on the front derailleur, pivot points are nice thin oil, nice premium grease on the spring. You can see we work that in, and that spring will just save that getting any water on it and going rusty. Same with the brakes, it's all similar principles. Pivot points have a nice thin oil on them, and then this little roller in there, I've got a little bit of general purpose grease on there to make sure that's actuating as smoothly and nicely as possible. Same with the quick release skewers, our copper grease on the thread, general purpose grease on the shaft, thin oil on the lever, and that again will actuate nicely and not bond or stick into the hub of the wheel. Now I'm going to wash down the wheels. So again, I like to do this because it gives me a good opportunity to check the spokes, to check the wheel over, to make sure everything is perfect on that wheel. And then I'm using our general purpose grease on the hub itself, mainly to future-proof that, to stop it getting corrosion on it. So it's not really to help that cassette onto the wheel, it's more to stop it corroding further down the line. Next up, I'm just going to wash the frame down. This wasn't a detailing service, so this was a general routine service. So we're going to wash the frame down, dry it off with a microfiber towel, and that will be ready to be put back together. Even the bottom bracket gets washed down. I'm using another one of our cleaning brushes from our website. I'm making sure everything is nice and clean within reason of the service, and very sharp, ready for the bike to be put back together. So again, nice microfiber towel that would take off all that water and draw off all the dirt and make that bike as clean as we can within the confines of the service that we're doing. Customer had asked us to do new bar tape, so we're removing the old bar tape here. That will allow me also to remove the outers of the rear derailleur cable and rear brake cable. But look at this rear derailleur cable. I'm amazed this was actuating. It was actually actuating quite nicely, but when I start to remove it, we've got that frayed off end inside the shifter. Very common this, for the ends to fray off on the rear derailleur cable on these Shimano shifters. You can see there, frayed off. It was only a matter of time before that would have clogged up in that shifter, so this service was just in the nick of time. And again, that back brake, you can see there the outer has broken down on itself. Again, it's only a matter of time before the water would have got in there and would have corroded that off too. Now I'm replacing this, but you can see here it's way too long. There's a full loop there in my hand that I can remove to this, to sit this in the same position as the front brake and still get full steering lock on the handlebars themselves. So I'm going to replace that. I'm going to shorten it off as well, make this rear brake a little bit shorter, a little bit tidier on that front end, so that looking at the bike everything looks that bit nicer, and also is less excess cabling to get in the way of anything on the handlebars there. So in goes our new outer, in goes our new cable in there into the shifter itself, and then I'll tape those just to hold them until I've actually done the bar tape. So we just get those in their rough position, and then we can do the bar tape when we're ready. But we're getting that new rear brake cable through the bike itself, and then also that new rear derailleur cable down to the derailleur itself, and there it is there, and the new outer from that one that was absolutely seized and solid. So that's a nice flexible outer there, and that will help the actuation of the derailleur itself. So on goes the new bar tape. This will tidy up the actual handlebar area for the rider. Obviously that's the one thing that as a rider you feel, so if that's all frayed off and getting nasty as it was, it's nice just to have a freshen up with this lovely bar tape that's going on here now. And then I finish off the ends of the bar tape as neatly as I can, and then I can do the other side. Again, I like to get these so that I'm finishing them off level both sides, so there's both the same amount of handlebar showing to the stem. So we get that on there, new bit of tape, and I'm quite happy now that the handlebar tape is spot on. So I'll put the end plugs in, one on each side. Also line up the logos of these to make sure they're nice and square to the frame. And now it's time to solve that bottom bracket. So we're pressing in the new rotor aluminium cupped bottom bracket bearing there. I lined up the rotor logo before I press that in, just to make sure that everything there is a little bit nicer. I'm doing these one side at a time. These are quite a large bottom bracket. This is the 385 bottom bracket, which is a massive case into the bearings of these, so it's a little bit of an unusual one this. But line up those rotor logos and then we can start to put the bike back together. So we've kind of gone through the cleaning process, the cabling process, the bottom bracket process before we actually start to put components back onto the bike, which is what I'm now doing. So on goes the back brake, in goes its new cable, a little bit of copper grease on the threads of the front, and also this bolt, because that's very prone to sticking in the forks themselves. So I put plenty of grease on there, again to future-proof my servicing regime, but I know I'll be able to get that undone and get that out without too much corrosion inside there in the future. So now on goes the chain set. So we're beginning to get the actual drivetrain itself back on the bike there. So on goes the pedal arm, in goes the bearing pre-tensioner, which I fill that to get to the right tension, and then I'll torque up these pedal arms. I like to get the chain set, the pedal arm this derailleur, everything in its final set position. Where the rest of the bike I'll talk afterwards. With the front derailleur, I like to get everything torqued and correct, because once that's on the bike and torqued, you're not moving it with adjustment. So I like to get that absolutely spot on. So in goes that front derailleur, on goes that cable. Check things like the derailleur hanger. I just like to check those to make sure that that's all correct. We often find those work loose. In this instance they were fine. But on goes that new rear derailleur cable. So that derailleur will now actuate way different to the way it was actuating when it came in. It will absolutely work perfectly. So now I go put on the new chain. So this has already been sized to the bike, so that's now on, and then I do my final adjustments and tweaks. The B screw on this one needed adjusting. It's amazing how many times I have to adjust that. It's one of the most overlooked adjustments on a rear derailleur, especially on the modern group sets. It can make a huge difference to the actuation in the gears to get that B adjuster correct, and that's what I did there. So check the brakes are working. They're now working fine. And then I've got a little detail to do here on the frame. We have actually altered the way these cables sit, but originally they would have been rubbing up and down that frame like that, rubbing away the frame. So we're going to use one of our vinyl detailing stickers. We do these in an A4 sheet with various different sizes, as you can see there, with the large one there that could be cut by yourself to cover up various things. But we're going to choose a little oval sticker straight off that sticker pack and put that on there to protect that frame from any more wear from that cable. So if you want those, they're available on our website, bikespeeds.com. I'll put the link in the description below. We sell also things like our cables and our cleaning products and everything on the website, so do check that out for us. So now we're going to go through the whole bike with a torque wrench to make sure everything is safe and secure. We don't leave it to guessing when it comes to tightening things. It's just as important to be sure nothing is over tightened as under tightened. And then we give the customer a report sheet that we show you when you've had a bike service, to show all the various torque wrench settings that we've used. And it makes a huge difference to a bike for simple reasons, like on the next one we're about to do, which is the seat post stay itself. This one here was completely loose, so he ran the risk of riding over a bump and that seat literally dropping into the frame, and that would have been race over or training session over. Now I also had this bottle cage here. The thread itself was just turning in the frame. Initially I thought that might be the riv nut, but actually it was this bolt. You can see how silver that is. That's where the thread on that bolt is completely disintegrated, completely gone. So we can put a new bolt in there, and thankfully that tightened up nicely. So that bottle cage is not going to start rattling on the frame and is now working. So you can see from these before and afters what a huge difference we've made to this bike. Again, it's subtle things like this brake here, cleaning parts up, getting everything working as it should, new chain, all the cables sorted out, new bottom bracket. This bike will ride like a new bike when it leaves the shop. So thanks for watching. Do subscribe, do hit the notification bell, and we'll see you again next week. Bye for now.